So, after that dramatic night of August 19, 1991, let's step back to explore how the stage was set long before Yeltsin's heroic act. It all began with the death of Joseph Stalin. The radio announcement marked a significant turning point for the Soviet Union. Stalin had led with an iron fist, using harsh tactics to maintain control. His death triggered a power struggle among his successors, leading to a new form of leadership known as collective leadership.
That's right. Under collective leadership, figures like Georgy Malenkov, Lavrenti Beria, and Vyacheslav Molotov came into prominence. They attempted to share power, but tensions quickly emerged. It wasn't long before one man began to rise above the others: Nikita Khrushchev. By September 1953, Khrushchev had become the secretary of the Communist Party. He introduced an era known as the Thaw, which relaxed many oppressive policies of Stalin's regime and freed prisoners from labor camps.
Khrushchev's leadership brought a wave of optimism. In February 1956, during the 20th Congress of the Communist Party, Khrushchev made a bold move by criticizing Stalin's rule openly. He exposed the dangers of the cult of personality, which had undermined truth and democracy within the party. This change signaled hope, though his time in power was not without mistakes. Domestic reforms that fell short and international incidents, like the Cuban Missile Crisis, eventually eroded trust in him.
Exactly. Despite promising changes, Khrushchev's failures led to his downfall in October 1964. Unrest within the Soviet leadership culminated in his removal. Officially, it was linked to age and health concerns. However, these masked deeper issues within the party. As Khrushchev exited, Leonid Brezhnev emerged as the new leader. Brezhnev's era is seen as a time of stability on the surface, but many historians argue it was an illusion, with underlying economic inefficiencies and stagnation.
As we move forward in our journey, the focus now shifts to Leonid Brezhnev's leadership. After Khrushchev was ousted, Brezhnev took charge, ushering in a period often seen as one of calm and control. The Soviet Union seemed stable, with a steady hand on the political helm. However, beneath this apparent stability were the seeds of economic problems that began to grow. Brezhnev's approach was quite conservative, often resisting change and avoiding major reforms.
Yes, Brezhnev's era is often called a time of stagnation. On the surface, things seemed to be in order, but in reality, economic inefficiencies plagued the country. Large amounts of resources were spent on maintaining a vast military presence, from Central Europe to the Far East. While Brezhnev managed to keep peace through agreements with the United States, including limiting nuclear arms, internally, the economy was struggling. The heavy emphasis on arms did little to support economic growth.
Exactly. Brezhnev's strategy involved striking deals with the West to ease tensions, a period known as détente. It was a time where dialogue was preferred over confrontation, and several treaties were signed to temper the arms race between superpowers. Yet back home, dissent was effectively stifled. In 1968, the Prague Spring in Czechoslovakia aimed at ushering in reforms and easing restrictions. But this movement was crushed by force, showcasing the Brezhnev Doctrine.
That's right. The Brezhnev Doctrine was firm. Any shift in a socialist state toward capitalism was not just their problem, but a shared concern for all socialist countries. Thus, the Soviet Union would intervene if needed, as seen in the invasion of Czechoslovakia. It was clear that any challenge to Soviet authority in Eastern Europe would be met with force. This may have held the bloc together for a while, but did so at the cost of genuine reform and progression.
As we continue our story, let's delve into the Soviet Union's decision to invade Afghanistan. It was December 1979 when Soviet forces moved into Afghanistan. The main reason for the invasion was to support the communist government there, which was in danger of collapsing due to internal conflict. This decision, however, rapidly became a costly and drawn-out military engagement. The Soviet troops found themselves facing a determined and resourceful enemy who used guerrilla tactics to launch surprise attacks.
That's right. The Afghan resistance received considerable support from the international community, which only further complicated matters for the Soviet Union. This military involvement wasn't just about boots on the ground. It became a huge financial burden. The strain it placed on the Soviet economy was immense, as resources had to be often diverted from domestic needs to fund this conflict. By the time Gorbachev came to power in 1985, the situation in Afghanistan was increasingly seen as unsustainable and deeply unpopular.
When Gorbachev took over, he faced the dual challenge of a stagnant economy and a draining conflict in Afghanistan. He realized that the war was a losing battle both on the ground and economically. There was a pressing need to pull out Soviet troops and refocus resources on domestic issues back home. This decision was not easy, given the pressures from military officials and hardliners who initially supported the intervention. But in the end, withdrawal was inevitable.
Indeed, the withdrawal process began under Gorbachev's watch, with the final troops leaving in February 1989. Despite this course correction, the damage had been done. The drawn-out intervention in Afghanistan had dealt a significant blow to the Soviet Union's standing internationally. It became clear that the Soviet military was not as invincible as previously believed. The war had exposed vulnerabilities and contributed further to the decline of Soviet power on the global stage.
As we transition from the tumult of the Afghanistan conflict, we shift our focus to the bold reforms initiated by Mikhail Gorbachev. Known as perestroika, these changes aim to breathe life into a stagnant economy. Gorbachev wanted to overhaul the economic structure, giving factories more freedom and inviting foreign companies. This can-do spirit was symbolic. Imagine McDonald's opening in Moscow in 1987, a beacon of Western influence amid Soviet life.
McDonald's in Moscow was indeed a sign of changing times. Then there was glasnost, or openness, which saw censorship relax and previously banned books and movies reaching the public. For the first time in decades, people could openly discuss issues about the government. The Chernobyl disaster became a pivotal point. Initially hidden, the full truth emerged after international pressure, bringing home the necessity of transparency in governance.
Indeed, Gorbachev's reforms didn't just stop at economic changes or increased transparency. They ventured into political territory too. By 1988, the Soviet constitution was tweaked to allow more democratic elections. The grip of single-party rule began to loosen. In 1989, elections even welcomed candidates outside the Communist Party. These steps aimed to restore confidence in governance, but opened the floodgates of desire for autonomy.
Precisely. This relaxation in control accelerated calls for independence, first from the Baltic states. They were eager to regain their freedom after years of being under Soviet rule. Gorbachev initially resisted, trying to keep the Union together. But the winds of change were too strong to hold back. The reforms, while well-intentioned, catalyzed events that started unraveling the Soviet fabric, challenging the prior rigid norm.
Now, turning from the reforms of Gorbachev, let's dive into the inspiring story of the Baltic states and their quest for independence. For years, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania yearned to break free from Soviet control. By the late 1980s, this wish for freedom started taking shape in what became known as the Singing Revolution, a peaceful protest movement made powerful through song and unity. Imagine thousands gathering, voices harmonizing in national anthems, fueling hope in their bright future.
Absolutely. It was the power of the people expressed through peaceful means. One of the most iconic moments was the Baltic Way on August 23, 1989. Imagine 2 million people forming a human chain that stretched over 600 kilometers, connecting the 3 Baltic capitals. This demonstration wasn't just a call for independence, but a symbol of shared resilience and determination. The world watched as these small nations spoke boldly against their suppression.
As the drive for self-determination grew, Gorbachev was initially caught in a tough spot. He was trying to balance reforming the Soviet system, yet keep the Union intact. Yet the Baltic states remained steadfast, and their pursuit of freedom persisted. In 1990, Lithuania declared its independence first, setting the stage for others to follow. Gorbachev's struggle to maintain control without crushing reform efforts showed just how complex this period was.
Indeed, the tipping point came in January 1991 with Lithuania. Gorbachev, feeling the pressure, made the grave decision to use force. The world watched in horror as the Red Army moved in, resulting in tragic confrontations and loss of life. While intended to reassert control, this use of force only served to bolster the resolve for independence within these nations. It was a pivotal moment, proving that the will for freedom could not be easily quenched.
So, following the Baltic states' courageous steps towards independence, the Soviet Union faced another storm, the hardliners' coup in August 1991. Gorbachev was on a vacation in Crimea when the coup plotters took their chance. This group of hardliners wanted to stop the reforms and return to old ways, declaring martial law. They thought it was their moment to seize power, but they underestimated the people's spirit. In Moscow, Yeltsin stood firm in opposition, showing incredible leadership.
Yeltsin indeed became the symbol of resistance, uniting people in defense of democracy. His famous stance on the tank became an emblem of the Russian people's desire for freedom. With his leadership, the coup crumbled within days. Gorbachev returned, but it was clear the world had changed. Yeltsin's decisive actions marked his rise, while the Soviet Union began its rapid disintegration. The coup's failure accelerated demands for independence across the republics.
Absolutely. The aftermath of the coup was like a countdown to the end of the Soviet Union. The trust in the Communist Party had been shattered, and public confidence was at an all-time low. By December 1991, a historic meeting occurred with leaders like Yeltsin from Russia, Kravchuk from Ukraine, and Shushkevich from Belarus. They signed an agreement in secret to dissolve the Soviet Union, marking the formation of the Commonwealth of Independent States. It was a dramatic turn of events.
Indeed, and the departure of these key republics was the final blow to the Soviet structure. On December 25, 1991, Gorbachev announced his resignation. That very evening, the Soviet flag was lowered from the Kremlin, signaling the end of an era. The Russian Federation flag was hoisted in its place, representing a new dawn. The dissolution was not only a political shift, but the birth of new nations, free to construct their distinct paths. Indeed, understanding history helps us appreciate the complex paths that nations take. By learning from the past, we can glean valuable lessons to shape a better future. We hope you've enjoyed this look back at the Soviet Union's journey. Subscribe, like, and leave a comment to become part of our community. Together, let's continue exploring and learning from history's rich tapestry.